Hello, Army. No one expected it to happen like this for years. He smiled through the rumors. He laughed off the questions. He stayed silent while the world kept guessing. But this time something was different. There was a pause, a look, a crack in the composure no one had ever seen before. And in that single moment, everything shifted. The truth wasn't shouted. Slipped out. Raw, unfiltered, impossible to ignore. Fans felt it instantly. That this wasn't just another passing comment. This wasn't just speculation. This was the moment Taehyung couldn't hide it anymore. And what he revealed about Jungkook might change the way you see everything. The air didn't feel the same after that moment. It wasn't allowed. There was no dramatic announcement, no official statement, just a shift. Subtle but violent in impact. The kind of shift that splits timelines into before and after. Taehyung didn't mean to say that much. You could see it in his eyes. The instant regret, the way his jaw tightened, like he was trying to pull the words back into his mouth, but it was too late. The silence that followed was heavier than anything he had actually said. Because sometimes the truth isn't in the sentence, it's in the hesitation before it. He had always been careful, measured, even playful when dodging questions about Jungkook. A smirk here, a vague answer there. He knew how to redirect attention without feeding the fire. But this time he didn't redirect. He paused. And in that pause something cracked. He said Jungkook's name differently. Softer. Not like a bandmate. Not like a casual mention. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't performative. It sounded personal, intimate in a way that made people lean closer to their screens without realizing it. Then came the sentence that changed everything. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't scandalous on the surface, but layered beneath it was something undeniable. An admission that the distance people thought existed didn't. We went through it together, he said. Together, not the team. Not everyone. Not back then. Together. The internet didn't explode immediately. It simmered. Clips were replayed. Frames were slowed down. Expressions analyzed. The way his voice dropped at the end. The way he swallowed after speaking. The way he looked down instead of at the camera. And then came the realization that made it impossible to look away. This wasn't nostalgia. This was unresolved because Taehyung wasn't smiling when he spoke about Jungkook. He wasn't reminiscing like someone looking back at old memories. He looked like someone still standing inside them. There was tension in his shoulders, a quiet ache in his tone, as if whatever they went through hadn't been neatly wrapped up with a bow. Fans started connecting dots, moments from past interviews, subtle shifts in body language over the years, the sudden careful distance in public settings, the way they stopped finishing each other's sentences like they used to. Had something happened or had something almost happened? That question became the center of everything because Taehyung didn't deny closeness. He didn't laugh it off. He didn't draw boundaries the way people expected him to. Instead, he said, some things aren't meant to be explained. Not private, not misunderstood, not meant to be explained. That wasn't avoidance. That was protection. Protection of what? A memory? A promise? Fracture. The controversy wasn't about scandal. It was about honesty. Raw, uncomfortable honesty that didn't fit neatly into labels. And that's what made it dangerous. The more clips resurfaced, the clearer it became. This wasn't a slip-up born from carelessness. It was exhaustion. Years of holding back, years of smiling through assumptions, years of pretending that certain chapters had closed when maybe they never truly did. And then someone pointed out the detail no one could ignore. When asked directly if he regretted anything, Taehyung didn't hesitate. I regret not being braver. Not being braver. The room shifted again. Braver about what? Speaking up, holding on, letting go. He didn't clarify, but his eyes did something that words couldn't. They softened in a way that didn't look like regret alone. It looked like longing. And suddenly the narrative changed. This wasn't about rumors. It was about timing. About two people growing up under a spotlight too bright to allow mistakes. About emotions forced into silence because the world was watching too closely. About choices made not because they were right but because they were safe. Taehyung never said there was a secret relationship. He never confirmed a hidden story. But he confirmed something more unsettling. There was depth. There was something real enough to require courage. And he didn't have it back then. The tension now isn't about what happened. It's about what still lingers because when the interviewer tried to move on, Taehyung didn't. He circled back, not directly but emotionally. He mentioned trust, growth, fear of losing someone important because you hesitated. He didn't say Jungkook's name again. He didn't need to. Everyone knew who he was talking about. And somewhere out there, Jungkook watched the same clip everyone else did. That's the part no one talks about. What did he feel hearing those words? Relief, anger, validation, or the same ache he couldn't hide? The truth isn't fully out. Not yet. What came out was just the crack. The air didn't feel the same after that moment. It wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. There was no dramatic announcement. No direct statement carved in stone. But the shift was undeniable. The way Taehyung paused. The way his voice softened for a fraction of a second before he continued. The way his eyes didn't quite meet the camera when Jungkook's name surfaced. People replayed it over and over. First, some dismissed it. Said it was nothing. Just another misinterpreted clip. But the more you watched, the harder it became to ignore the subtle tension beneath his calm expression. It wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't say. The unfinished sentence, the quiet inhale, the almost smile that didn't reach his eyes. And that's when the theories began to spiral. For years, the narrative had been carefully balanced. Public appearances polished, words measured, every interaction analyzed by millions. Taehyung had always been known for his honesty, but also for his control. He knew how to protect what mattered. He knew how to draw the line between what was shared and what was sacred. At us. Oh, why did this feel different? Because this time it didn't look controlled. There was vulnerability there. The kind that slips out when you're tired of holding something in. The kind that reveals more than any direct confession ever could. When he spoke about misunderstandings and distance, his tone carried weight. Not bitterness, not anger. Something heavier. Something unresolved. And Jungkook's name lingered in the silence that followed. Fans began connecting moments from the past, old interviews, subtle changes in body language, shifts in energy during group content. Clips that once felt harmless suddenly carried new meaning. A laugh that seemed forced. A glance that lasted too long. A space between them that hadn't always been there. But here's the part no one wants to admit. Sometimes the truth isn't about scandal. Sometimes it's about growth. About two people evolving in different directions under the pressure of global attention. Still, that doesn't stop the emotional impact. Because when Taehyung said, "Some things are better understood without being explained," it didn't sound like avoidance. Sounded like closure. And closure only comes after something significant. The tension wasn't hostility. It was history. And history is complicated. Behind the lights, behind the stages, behind the carefully curated images, there are human emotions, expectations, miscommunications, moments that fans will never see. The truth that seemed to slip out wasn't a betrayal or a dramatic revelation. It was an acknowledgement that whatever existed between them had changed. Not necessarily broken, not necessarily damaged, changed. That single word carries more weight than any rumor ever could. What makes it powerful is that Taehyung didn't elaborate. He didn't accuse. He didn't deny. He simply allowed the silence to speak. And sometimes silence is louder than any confession. Now the question isn't whether something happened. The real question is what happens next. Because when someone who has mastered emotional restraint finally lets a crack show, it means something has already shifted internally. And once that shift begins, it rarely goes back to what it was. Was a distance caused by schedules, personal growth, private conversations that drew boundaries, we'll never fully understand. Maybe, or maybe the real story isn't about conflict at all, but about acceptance, about recognizing that relationships, especially under unimaginable pressure, transform over time. Taehyung didn't look angry. He looked reflective. And that reflection tells us this isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of a new chapter. One where truth doesn't need to be shouted to be felt. But here's what keeps everyone watching. If this was him holding back, what would it look like if he ever decided not to? And if that day comes, will we be ready for what he chooses to say next? What made it unsettling wasn't drama, it was restrained. After that interview, Taehyung didn't rush to clarify anything, then get extensions. No playful posts to redirect the narrative. No subtle jokes to calm speculation, just silence. And silence in this situation felt intentional. The public expected balance to be restored quickly. a reassuring interaction, a visible moment of normalcy, something simple. There were no dramatic confrontations, no visible arguments, no public fallout. That's what makes the situation heavier. This wasn't explosive. It was quiet, and quiet transformations are the hardest to understand from the outside. Another detail didn't go unnoticed. When Jungkook was later asked about support systems, he responded with composure, emphasizing independence, personal responsibility, and learning to stand alone. That it wasn't a denial of connection, but it wasn't a reinforcement either. It felt like someone defining their own ground. Two individuals, two evolving identities, both strong, both introspective, both navigating adulthood in front of millions. The narrative that once revolved around inseparability now feels recalibrated. And that recalibration is where the tension lives, not in scandal and subtlety. Because if something truly dramatic had happened, it would have shown in sharper ways. Instead, what we're witnessing looks like two people who shared something meaningful, whatever that meaning was, learning how to carry it differently. A team's expressions in recent appearances reveal something else. Acceptance, not regret, not visible longing, but a quiet understanding that some connections don't disappear, they transform. Yet there's still that unanswered question: why now? Why allow even a glimpse of vulnerability after years of careful composure? Could be timing, could be personal growth. It could be the realization that avoiding certain topics only amplifies them. Or maybe, and this is the possibility that keeps people watching, maybe the story isn't finished. Because transformation doesn't mean detachment. Sometimes it means rebuilding on different terms. Behind the scenes, there may have been conversations we'll never hear. Honest ones, difficult ones, the kind that don't fit into headlines, the kind that require maturity rather than spectacle. And if that's true, then what we witnessed wasn't exposure. It was acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that whatever bond existed shaped them. That distance, if it ever existed, wasn't fueled by resentment, but by necessary change. Still, one thing remains undeniable. When Taehyung speaks about the past now, there's no tension in his jaw, no hesitation in his breathing, just steadiness. And steadiness doesn't come from unresolved chaos. It comes from clarity. But clarity about what? Closure or a new beginning the public simply hasn't seen yet. Because in an industry built on performance, the most powerful moments are the unscripted ones. And that first crack, that pause, that shift in tone didn't feel scripted. It felt human, which means the real story may never be dramatic enough to satisfy rumors. It may simply be about two people who grew apart in certain ways, and learned how to stand side by side without leaning the way they once did. But here's the final layer that no one can ignore. Growth doesn't erase history, and history, when shared deeply, never truly fades. So the world waits, not for scandal, not for confirmation, but for the next unscripted moment. Because if there's one thing we've learned, it's this. When Taehyung pauses before speaking, it's never accidental. And next time he might not pause at all. The weeks that followed didn't bring chaos. They brought observation. Every appearance became a quiet test. Every shared frame, every stage lineup, every behind-the-scenes clip was examined with a new lens. Not aggressively but attentively. The audience wasn't looking for scandal anymore. They were looking for truth in body language. And something subtle began to shift again. It wasn't dramatic closeness. It wasn't obvious distance. It was composure. A kind of mutual understanding that felt intentional. During one group setting, the camera caught a brief moment no one expected. Not a grand gesture. Not a headline-worthy interaction. Just a glance. Taehyung looked over first. Jungkook didn't react immediately, but a second later he did. Not with surprise, not with avoidance, with familiarity. The kind that doesn't need performance. It lasted barely a second, but it didn't look strained. That's what unsettled people the most, because tension is easy to read. Conflict leaves traces. Awkwardness shows in posture, in micro-expressions, in the space people create between themselves. There was none of that. There was calm. And calm suggests something happened privately long before the public ever sensed it. The narrative online began splitting into two extremes. Some believed the earlier vulnerability meant hidden conflict. Others believed it hinted at something deeper that had simply matured beyond public understanding. But what if neither was entirely true? What if what we witnessed wasn't exposure but transition? Taehyung's interviews continued to carry that reflective tone. Not heavy, not burdened, just thoughtful. When asked about meaningful connections in his life, he spoke about timing, about how people meet each other at different emotional stages. You can care deeply, he said once, and still grow in different directions. That line didn't sound tragic. It sounded peaceful, and that's where the real mystery lies. Peace doesn't come from denial. It comes from resolution, which means whatever tension once existed, whether it was internal, external, or imagined by the audience, may have already been processed behind closed doors. There's something powerful about that possibility, because the public often expects visible proof of reconciliation or visible proof of fallout. We expect dramatic arcs, but adulthood rarely unfolds that way. Sometimes two people simply have a conversation no one else hears. Sometimes they acknowledge what they meant to each other. Sometimes they decide to protect it differently. And protection doesn't always look like closeness. It can look like boundaries. Another quiet detail surfaced during a live appearance. When asked about trust, Jungkook spoke about loyalty not being loud, about how the strongest bonds don't need constant display. It wasn't directed at anyone, but it didn't feel random either.